Mysterious new warp drive patent services online. We know warp drive, of course, from Star Trek. After appearing for decades in science fiction, then moving into actual theory, a new patent for an updated warp drive was published last year. To no fanfare, like many other false starts in cutting-edge research, the patent may represent the next step in the expanding theory, or it could mean the practical real-world design of a functional warp drive that is on the horizon. How to bend space-time with warp drive? After first publishing his groundbreaking 1994 warp drive concept in the journal Classical and Quantum Gravity, Mexican mathematician and physicist Miguel Alcubierre received significant positive and negative feedback. Most applauded his solution, which did indeed appear to create a working theory on how a warp drive might allow faster than light travel without violating the laws of physics. In contrast, others zeroed in on the incredible amount of energy needed to propel his theoretical spacecraft. The warp drive was further refined in 2007 by engineer H. David Froning Jr., who, among other things, previously worked for the U.S. Air Force, Boeing, and McDonnell Douglas. He published those refinements in 2008 and later released a 2019 book on his research. Both theories took a giant leap forward in 2011 when a paper published by NASA scientist Harold G. Sonny White further improved upon Alcubierre's design, dramatically reducing the amount of exotic matter needed to fuel the hypothetical drive from a Jupiter-sized amount to something akin like the size of NASA's Voyager 1 probe. While this is still a significant volume and well beyond our current ability to manufacture, this dramatic reduction in fuel requirements seems to indicate that a real-world warp drive may one day be feasible. One particular attempt to build a drive is being made by Nebraska University adjunct professor David Powers and his company, Space Warp Dynamics. He posted a recent series of tests to YouTube. However, his company's Indiegogo campaign to build such a drive has only reached 3% of the target goal. Their website and Facebook pages show only incremental advances since, and interestingly, the company's website notes that Powers was inspired by his own craft sighting at the age of 16, although no other details of this sighting are provided. Apart from that, little is known about this project. In April 2020, two engineers from Chicago, Jessica Galanis and Eitan Halm-Sukard, published a patent application for a drive using the updated Harold White designs, a device aptly named the Alcubierre-White warp drive. Barely a month into the COVID-19 shutdown, the patent's publication seemed to sneak under the radar, with a lone report by Reed Multiplex, December 2020, one that sits behind a paywall. And in the summary portion of the patent, Galanis and Sukard explain how the invention uses two Alcubierre gravitational walls to achieve a warp drive effect as means of propulsion while surrounding or enclosing a cavity or space where passengers can travel. The design is consistent with Alcubierre, whose solution, they point out, suggested a method for changing the metric of space-time and creating a space-time warp bubble such that while from outside the bubble can advance in superluminal speed. From within the bubble, the speed is much lower than the speed of light. The patent also notes the work of Froning, who they say observed how, if sufficient warping is achieved, ship speed is slower than light speed within a region that surrounds it, even if it's moving faster than light with respect to Earth. I had never personally heard of Alcubierre drive until 2013, Sukard admitted in a 2-hour telephone conversation interview with a debrief to discuss his device, how the design came about, and how realistic building his patent warp drive was. A software engineer by trade, Sukard was working on handwriting and signature recognition software when he had a revelation that would lead to his patented design. It occurred to me that we should be able to describe all physical phenomena as geometry, and that space-time was merely an emergent property, which is diametrically opposed to Albert Einstein's approach. The Israeli-born engineer said this revelation launched him into a more in-depth study of things like dark matter, loop theory, quantum gravity, and ultimately to the idea of warp drive. I first stumbled across Alcubierre 2013, Sukkard explained, a discovery that led to him spending the next 3 years trying to rectify his new take on classical physics with Dr. White's theory. I knew from my own calculations that energy itself must create gravity, and by extension anti-gravity, he said, and that this had to be the solution to Alcubierre. By 2017, Sukkard's wife and fellow engineer Jessica Galanis told him that his theoretical work was sound and that it was time to try to file a patent. Unfortunately, the first try was unsuccessful. They would not take it, he said, of the response by the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. I think they didn't understand the physics, he said. Sukkard said he spent the next 2 years going back and forth with the USPTO until in 2020 they finally made a concession. By then they did not refute the fact that the patent is based upon a valid working theory, but still said I would need a physical device to prove the physics. As a result of this concession, they accepted the application, leading to the 2020 publication. Has history been made? When asked where his patent will go from here, Sukkard was particularly critical in his response. He says, I don't trust anyone else to do the experiments, he said, because too many do them in the wrong way. To do these experiments, Sukkard also admits that his expertise is not enough. He said, I would need other physicists involved, an RF engineer, a materials scientist, and many others with experience in areas like heat, dissipation, X-ray, and other related fields. Sukkard also noted the significant amount of funding needed for his research and that such funding is not presently on the horizon. And the debrief reached out to Dr. Jason Cassabury, professor of Propulsion Research Center, University of Alabama, Huntsville. He and one of his students, Joseph Agnew, a researcher at the Propulsion Research Center, explained that there were problems with Sukkard's theory. Cassabury and Agnew said that the use of highly concentrated magnetic fields to create gravity wells in common aspect of warp drive theory. I've seen a number of people try to relate high-frequency electrical oscillations to warp drive. Based on some of the papers I've looked at, there is indeed a relation between highly concentrated magnetic field energy, like in a huge solenoid, and a positive gravity well, but the amount of energy required to be detectable is quite large, and although doable, that experiment has not been run yet, Agnew explained. And he explained that the biggest problem is the negative energy or anti-gravity well part of the system that makes it an Alcubierre drive and not just a gravity well. Both Agnew and Cassabury concurred that aspects of the patent did jive with previous warp drive models. However, since there was no experimental data, it would be impossible to determine if the drive would work. Dr. Cassabury echoed Agnew's sentiment, saying, I hope that someday someone discloses an invention or technology along with a demonstration of a real system, such as a video of a working propulsion system lifting itself off the ground, no strings attached. This is from the debrief by Christopher Plain. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.